just to quickly have a look at what we're going to be covering this afternoon. So we're looking at the Eatwell guide and how we've got to where we are now. The food groups and key messages of the Eatwell guide, the main nutrients and why these are important in the diet, and how the recommendations from the guide can be applied. So that'll be when I talk to you a little bit more about the resources for schools. Throughout, you'll see links to Food and Fat to Life, our resources, and afterwards we'll also share the presentation, which will have all the direct links in it. So you don't need to worry too much about making notes or trying to remember where anything is, because we'll send you the presentation afterwards and you'll be able to click straight through. And then right at the end, we've got a few links that you can take a look at later, with some further sources of information. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Bridget, and I'm controlling the slides today. So Bridget will just be giving me a nod when I need to move those on. Thank you, Bridget.
Brilliant. Thank you, Claire. So as Claire said, we'll be going through the key parts of the Eatwell guide. So our main bit of healthy eating guidelines for the UK. But just to set the scene, to talk about why healthy eating is so important, I'm sure I don't need to tell that to anyone here, but in context, there are lots of challenges that we have around healthy diets. So of course, we have an issue with childhood overweight and obesity being much higher than we would like. So 1 in 5 children starting school overweight or obese, and leaving primary school in year 6, 1 in 3. Now that, of course, shows that there's a big increase across the children's time in primary school. So it means that it's a really important time for children to get support to eat healthily, for them to start to understand healthy eating messages. Of course, it doesn't stop with children. We've also got a problem with adults. So 26% of adults are classified as obese, and about 60% of adults across men and women are overweight or obese. So as a nation, we do have a big problem with the balance of our diet and with diet-related health. So this essentially means the diet is an imbalance in the way that it would like, and in the way that is described in the Eatwell guide. We're eating too much of some things, not enough of others. So we're having too much sugar, so free sugar specifically, too much salt, saturated fat, and more calories than we need. But alongside that, we're not eating enough of other things. So in some cases, there are low intakes of vitamins and minerals. Now, this doesn't mean we're getting deficiency disease in the way that we might see in places where food intake is very restricted, but we do know that some of the intakes of our essential vitamins and minerals are below what we would like. We also have low intakes of fibre. So very few of us actually meet fibre recommendations, and pretty much all of us across the population need to be eating more fibre from foods like whole grains, pulses, nuts, seeds, and fruits and vegetables. Everybody knows that we have the recommendation for 5 a day. Now that's really seen as a minimum for healthy diets. Ideally, we could have more. So we always talk about at least 5 a day. And currently, about 1/3 of adults are meeting the 5 a day, but only 12% of 11 to 18-year-olds. Now, we don't talk about younger children meeting 5 a day because we don't have specific portion sizes set out for younger children. So it's not quite right to base whether they're meeting 5 a day on the 80-gram portion, which we have for adults and older children. But we know that for the 11 to 18-year-olds, the fruit and veg intake is really very poor, and average intakes are about sort of 2.5 portions a day rather than the 5 that we would hope. That's great. Next slide, please, Claire. So if you've been around as long as some of us at BNF has, you will have seen different iterations of the guidance that we have. So we started off in the 90s with the balance of good health, and that changed in 2007 to the Eatwell plate, and then in 2016 to the Eatwell guide. And you can see that, broadly speaking, the sort of balance of food groups is very similar. But there were some key changes when we moved from the Eatwell plate to the Eatwell guide. So the way that this was done is that scientists looked at all of the recommendations that we have, both the recommendations about food, like 5 a day, and the recommendations about nutrients, like vitamins, minerals, salt, etc. And they looked at what we'd have to change about the diet, the current diet that we have, what would have to change to help us meet those. And to cut a long story short, they did some very clever statistics and modelling to find that these were the balance of food groups that are shown here in the Eatwell guide is what we need. So there were some slight changes in terms of increases for the proportion of fruit and vegetables and the starchy foods. And you'll also see that the sugar foods, the treat discretionary foods, whereas they were on the plate itself in previous versions, they came off the plate and sit to the side in that bottom left corner in the Eatwell guide. So I'll talk now about I'll move on to talking about each of the food groups in a moment, but if we can look at the next one, please, Claire. Yeah, we'll move on. If we can go to the next slide, please. So essentially the Eatwell guide applies to everybody. So across the population, apart from very young children. So the advice is that it doesn't apply for children under 2 because their needs are very specific and they're just learning to eat, really. From 2 to 5, children can move towards the eating like the Eatwell guide. And really, essentially, apart from some very specific medical conditions, for most people, they can use the Eatwell guide as the basis. So whether that's for a vegetarian or vegan diet, whether it's people who may have allergies to specific foods or who don't eat dairy, for example, the balance of foods is really about getting the proportions right, but you can adapt the specific foods that are included to the kind of diet that you follow. So here are the main food groups. So of course, fruits and vegetables, the starchy foods, potatoes, bread, rice, pasta. We would talk about protein foods. So these are beans, pulses, fish, eggs, meats, and other sources of protein. The dairy foods and the oils and spreads. So I'll talk about each of these in a bit more detail next. Okay, next slide, please. So fruits and vegetables. So this is really, really well understood across the population that we need to eat more of these. And it's usually, if we talk to people about health eating, it's the first thing that they'll say, that they know they need to eat more fruits and vegetables. So they're an important source of vitamins and minerals. So things like potassium, vitamin C, folate, all found in fruits and vegetables, and also an important source of fiber. So we all need to try and eat at least 5 a day. And it's also really important to try and get a variety of different types. You know, you can do this in different ways. People sometimes talk about eating the rainbow, but essentially it's about trying to vary this as much as possible. And fresh is great, but also it can include canned, frozen and dried. And these can also be a really sort of quick and inexpensive way to include fruits and vegetables. So things like frozen peas and other frozen vegetables are really handy. Cans of chopped tomatoes. So these can be a really quick and easy way to get fruits and vegetables into the diet. Next slide, please. So then to the starchy foods, so things like potatoes, bread. You can see things like couscous pictured here, porridge, bagels. So lots of different kinds of breads and grain-based foods. So these can really form the basis of meals. And where possible, it's a great idea to choose the whole grain version. So things like wholemeal bread, whole grain pastas, brown rice, whole grain breakfast cereals. These provide extra fiber, which we know that we need to eat more of, and they also provide more of the micronutrients than we would find in the white versions. These are actually quite a key source of vitamins and minerals in the diet because we eat quite a lot of them. And so while they can get a bit of a bad press, you know, this idea that carbs are fattening and don't provide anything except calories, they're actually really quite an important source of nutrients for us. Okay, next slide, please, Claire. So then the protein foods. So this is actually, looking at all of the food groups, this is probably the most varied with lots and lots of different kinds of foods. So of course it would include things like meat and fish, also eggs, but also plant-based sources like nuts, lentils, beans, and all the different types of products that you can find made of those. And of course there are lots of kind of meat alternative products now available, burgers, deli meats, sausage rolls even made from plant-based products. So the key really is to get a variety, and we're really encouraged to eat more beans and pulses and to include more plant-based sources. Great from a nutritional point of view because they provide plenty of fiber as well as protein and other nutrients, but also thought to be more sustainable for the planet as well. But again, fish, eggs, meat, and other proteins. We are recommended to include 2 portions of fish every week, one of which should be an oily type, so that would be salmon, mackerel, sardines. and that could be fresh or canned or frozen. We're quite low in terms of fish consumption, so if you eat fish, it's a good idea to try and include 2 portions a week. Okay, next slide, please. So then dairy and alternatives. So these are really important for calcium, but also other important nutrients like iodine and B vitamins. Really important for bone health, of course, in terms of calcium, but also lots of other important nutrients too. There are lots of plant-based alternatives available. Naturally, these won't contain the same balance of nutrients, so it's a good idea to look out for those that are fortified, particularly with calcium, but if possible, other nutrients like B vitamins and iodine. In most cases, it's a good idea to choose lower fat and lower sugar options so that we don't get excess calories that we don't need. Next slide, please. So oils and spreads make up a small proportion of the diet, but they're still nutritionally important. So it's best to get most of our fats and oils from unsaturated sources. So these are plant-based sources, so things like olive oil, rapeseed oil, vegetable oils, spreads made from those, and to avoid having too much saturated fat from things like butter, fatty meats, and so forth. And we know that there's a relationship between the kinds of fats that we eat and the cholesterol that we get in our blood, which is then linked to heart health and stroke. So the healthy choice is to choose mostly unsaturated fats. I think there's a question about oat milks, and there can be a lot of controversy about plant-based milks. They're all slightly different in terms of the proportion of nutrients that they contain. And oat milk was one that kind of was really, really popular for a while and then fell from grace. I think the reality is that it's all about the balance. It's definitely a good idea to choose lower sugar versions of plant-based milk alternatives. Some of them will have sugar or flavorings added. The key thing really is if you're entirely swapping from dairy to plant-based, it is important to look out for those nutrients for the fortification. But plant-based milks, including oat milk and other types, can be included as part of a healthy diet. Okay, so next slide, please, Claire. So the foods high in fat, salt, and sugars. Now, we consume much too much of these across the board, so both children and adults are eating too much, and they contribute saturated fat, salt, and free sugars, which are all nutrients that we need to try and eat less of. So it's tricky because they're widely available, they're inexpensive, and they're the foods that we really like to eat. But consuming these means that we need, if we're going to consume them, I mean, we don't need them as part of a healthy diet. Lots of us do like to include them, and if we do, they should be in smaller portions and less often. Okay, next slide, please. So alongside the food that we eat, it's also really important to stay hydrated. So the general guidance across the board, both for children and for adults, is to drink about 6 to 8 cups or glasses of fluid a day. And of course, that should be a bit smaller for younger children and larger for adults and older children. It's difficult to give very precise recommendations about how much we should drink. It varies a lot, of course, in terms of our body size, our activity levels, how hot it is outside. But a good indicator is that if you're thirsty, you're already a little bit dehydrated, so you need to drink. And for children, young children can be prone to dehydration because they just forget to drink. They may not be in a position to get drinks for themselves. So it's really important that young children are encouraged to drink frequently so that they have drinks with meals, with snacks, and that they have access to water throughout the day. Next slide, please. So you'll see on the Eatwell guide that energy is mentioned. Of course, this is for adults. So it's about 2,000 calories per day, 2,500 for men. Across both food and drinks. But of course, this is a guideline that we use for adults and not for children. Next slide, please. Also on the Eatwell guide is a reference to labelling. And so checking the label on packaged food. And the easiest way to have a look at this is to use the traffic light label. So you'll see this colour-coded label on the front of lots and lots of foods that you will find in shops and supermarkets. And choosing mostly those with more greens and ambers most of the time is a good way to go, and avoiding those with lots of reds for most of the time. I saw a question pop up about caffeine, caffeinated drinks, and hydration. And the evidence that we have is actually that they can count towards your hydration status. You'll be glad to hear. Um, they do have a diuretic effect, so you will lose a little bit more fluid in urine as a result of the caffeine. But overall, the contribution that they make to fluid intake, it means that they're hydrating. So next slide, please. So finally, eating a balanced diet is about not only what we eat, but how much, and about getting the proportions right of foods from the different foods groups. There is portion size information in the Eatwell guide, but only for a limited number of foods. So there's portion sizes for fruit and vegetables, which is an 80-gram portion, and there's also some guidance around fish. But for most foods, there isn't information about portion size in the Eatwell guide. So we have done a bit of work on that recently. We've done it previously for adults, and we do have some new guidance on portion size for children, which you can find on our website, and the link is there, and we can also share that later on. So I think I'm now handing over to you, Claire, to talk about resources that you can use.
Thank you, Bridget. That was really helpful information there. Thank you. So now just thinking about the Eatwell guide now, we're going to consider, what that means when we're teaching and how we use that. So I hope some people might be familiar with the Food Effect to Life website. So this is our education site for schools. And on that site, we have different areas for different ages. And I just wanted to highlight what we call our key facts. So just taking the sort of 5 to 7 and 7 to 11 areas, sitting behind all our materials on the site are a series of key facts. So these are kind of key statements, and they provide the structure behind the materials that we put on the website so that we can ensure progression. So these are the kind of statements we have about the Eatwell guide, running right across the primary age phase. And I'm just going to talk you through some of the materials in a moment that we have available. But just while I'm here, I just wanted to flag our food curriculum roadmaps. So we've got these sort of visual roadmaps which show children's learning journey from the age of sort of 3 up to 16. And these sort of state all the key facts on the Food Effect to Life site, so you can see how information progresses. And there's 3 of these roadmaps. So one about health eating, cooking, and where food comes from. So you might like to take a look at the health eating one after this session and just see, how the progression goes from age 3 right up to 16. And also we've got interactive versions of these, so you can look at that, the roadmap, and click on one of those statements, and that will take you straight to the page on Food Effect to Life where the supporting materials are. So that's just to show you, say, the progression of teaching about healthy eating. So turning to our Eatwell guide, one thing that's very useful on the website is actually a teacher's guide about the Eatwell guide. I say teacher, but it could be anybody who's, wants to know more about the Eatwell guide or is planning to teach it. So it could be our early years practitioners. And I know we've got some early years specialists with us this afternoon. So this is just a really nice, clear guide that talks through the food groups and the general messages. So it will recap, some of what Bridget's shared with us this afternoon. And it's really good to make sure you've got a really clear understanding of what the Eatwell guide is all about, because it's quite a simple picture really, but there's so much information and detail behind it, and lots of really interesting stuff as well. So I recommend everyone has a read of that before they teach anybody else or talk to anyone else about the Eatwell guide. So I've just gone down to right at the beginning of our age phases on the website. So we've got age 3 to 5 years and what we have there about the Eatwell guide. So obviously children are very young at that age, and we're not going into as much detail as we would with children, going into primary, or the detail that Bridget went into today. But it's just to start showing young people this image as this is an image that shows us how we eat well. And what we really want young children to take from this is you know, that there's lots of different foods and they need to have a variety of food. You know, we need to be eating lots of different foods, and that also they start to get a sense of the foods sitting in groups. So probably the fruit and vegetable one is probably the easiest group, because children probably more familiar, know the different types of fruit and vegetables. They can see more clearly that they belong together. And then we're hoping, you know, as they're, you know, working with these materials, they'll start to understand how other foods, you know, group together as well. And we've got a really lovely sort of simple game here, sort of for a small group of 4 children. And you print out one of those game boards for each of the children. The cards in the middle of the screen there are cut up and put face down, and the children take it in turns to choose a card and try and place it on their board. And you can see as well, we've obviously the food pictures have actually got the coloured borders on them, so that it sort of gives a clue to the children which group they belong in. But what they're trying to do is get themselves a food from each of those 4 larger groups and a drink to win the game. So that's just getting children, you know, starting to be familiar with that. And there's a link at the bottom here which takes you straight through to the area in the 3 to 5 part of the website where these resources and others live. And there's also, you know, text in there as well, sort of guidance notes for teaching as well. So then moving on to our 5 to 7 year olds. So now we're looking a little bit more, we want them to sort of, you know, get a deeper understanding of the Eat Well guide. So now we want them to look at the groups. We've got a sort of a presentation, very simple presentation, taking one group at a time to give you a chance to really talk about it with them. So you can see a couple of slides at the bottom there on the left as an example. So, you know, if you're talking about the proteins group, you can ask them, you know, what foods can they see in the group? Have they had these before? Which ones come from plants? Which ones come from animals? And things like that, really, just to get them engaging with the foods that are there. And then this is sort of the sort of age where we want them to notice as well that the groups are different sizes and that there's a reason for it, there's a significance. So we want them to make the link to the size of the group with being the proportion of those sorts of foods that they should be eating in their overall diet over a day or two. And we can see, you know, this should be having plenty of fruit and vegetables, plenty of carbohydrates, and then, you know, some of the protein foods, some of the dairy foods, and a small amount of fats. So we've got activities such as the sorting activity. So you can see we've got all the foods from the Eat Well guide. We've actually got the actual images from the guide as a set of cards, so they can be cut out. And then we've got a blank Eat Well guide, so the children can, you know, place those in the groups, and that generates lots of interesting conversations as well about where things belong. And so it's good to just, you know, make sure the children do understand, you know, what's in each group, because in the future, if somebody says to them, well, you know, you need some more dairy foods, if you don't know what goes in the dairy food group, then you wouldn't know what to have. So this is all about really embedding for children which foods belong in which groups. And then we're starting to see, you know, in these resources now, a little bit of application as well. So not just learning about it, but also applying it. So we've got an activity there where children are challenged to sort of create their own lunch based on the Eat Well guide. So then as we're going through to our older primary, now we want them to really understand the messages of the group. So why we're eating, you know, why we need the foods from the fruit and vegetable group, you know, for our vitamins, our minerals, our fibre. And also we want them to be able to look at a dish or a meal and know where that is represented on the Eat Well guide. So with younger children, they're just sorting sort of singular foods like an apple, a banana, some milk. And then as they get older, we want them to recognise that we don't, you know, eat all foods individually. Lots of foods are combined to make dishes. And how do these dishes, how does, you know, shepherd's pie or cottage pie contribute to our overall diet in the day? You know, where do the ingredients from that belong on the Eat Well guide? And then we want to get them to think about, you know, using the guide to plan. So this is where they're starting to apply the information to think about it, keep it in the forefront of their mind. So, you know, what did you have for breakfast? Which food groups did that go in? So what does the rest of your day look like now? You know, which groups do you want to be eating at other times of the day to make sure you're getting a really good balance and a really good variety of different foods. So for this, we've got, say, presentations, a nice one with different meals and snacks and identifying where the foods in those belong on the Eatwell guide, getting children to look for, you know, groups that aren't represented in a meal. So again, to make them think, well, you know, later on in the day, maybe I'll, you know, have some cheese or some milk if I haven't had dairy in my main meal, and so on. So then as they say that's the kind of their journey about learning about the Eatwell guide, and then that moves into you know, with the 7 to 11-year-olds, that moves into looking then at energy and nutrients. So this is when things get a little bit more detailed, you know, a little bit more high level sort of information, and then this is really getting down to the sort of the crux of why we are following the Eatwell guide, why we're eating food from different groups, and it's because they provide, you know, different amounts of energy, different amounts of nutrients, and these are what we need. These are what our body needs for different reasons. So we've got again sort of presentations that you can use to take students through those. We've got a lovely set of nutrient cards, so you can get children to order, you know, hand them out and get them to order themselves from highest to lowest in different nutrients like carbohydrate and fibre, etc. To make the point to them that, you know, we can't survive on one food. This is why we need a variety, because different foods give us different things that we need. Just to show you the Eatwell challenge, so you can do this with lots of age groups. It's a sort of a drag and drop really, but it's sorting the foods. They pop up on the screen, and then children can drag and drop them into the right place on the guide, and then the guide will actually score them. So if they put things in the wrong groups, it gives a score, and then right at the end they can go and get their feedback on anything that's not in the right place. And then last of all, it can be printed out, so that's quite nice. So you can keep that kind of as a record of, you know, their accuracy, and then perhaps they can have a go in the future and see if they can improve their score. And just thinking a bit more about applying the Eatwell guide, we've got a set of projects for primary, so one for each year of primary school, and they fit into where food appears in the curriculum in different parts of the UK. So for example, in England, in design and technology, cooking and nutrition, in science, in RSE, there is reference to learning about food and healthy eating, and these projects have been developed to kind of cover food for the different sort of ages or stages, and be a progressive set of projects. So say one for each year of primary, there's sort of 6 lessons in each of them, and they all involve learning about food and making, designing, creating meals and dishes. And all of them will make reference to the Eatwell guide and pull out different messages and let children learn to apply, you know, different understandings of the Eatwell guide. So for example, just to say, we've got a lovely lunch, and in this one, children are looking at sandwiches. So that it becomes an activity where they're sorting foods out of different sandwiches into different food groups, looking at which foods aren't represented in the sandwich, and then planning a lunch that's based on the Eatwell guide ultimately. And the salad one, similarly, they're looking at the ingredients in different salads, what is and isn't represented from the Eatwell guide, and also then planning a salad that is based on a starchy food and that contributes to 5 a day. So lots of application of what they've learned about the Eatwell guide through doing these projects. So just a couple of other things I just wanted to mention before I finish. We have a self-directed CPD programme called Teaching Primary Food and Nutrition, and it's for anyone involved with sort of primary teaching, and it's to improve sort of, you know, the people's confidence and competence around teaching food, so they're delivering quality food lessons. And it's quite a simple process. You can sign up for TPFN. We have got a few of these binders left that you can see some of those people holding over here. We've got just a few left now, so if you sign up quick, you might get one of those, and it guides you through. It'll tell you, it'll help you set yourself targets, and give you ideas of things you can do and things you can, go and see, etc. And we've got lots of webinars as well, and they help you, increase your knowledge, understanding of teaching food in primary, and it can do it at your own pace whenever you have time. So I just wanted to flag that. And I also just wanted to let you know that we've had Healthy Eating Week for quite a number of years at BNF. So we're making a bit of a change this year. We're going to have Snacktember instead, and that's going to be in September 2025 and lasts the whole month. And this will be about helping children and young people choose more sustainable snacks. And that's for ages 5 right up to 16 years. And there'll be digital resources, recipes, posters, etc. As we've seen sort of in Healthy Eating Week in the past, but this will be all about having healthier snacks. So our registration's open, so do register, and then we'll be able to send you information when that's ready. We'll probably start our updates in around March time. So just before I finish, if you don't get Education News, which is our monthly email update, I'd recommend signing up for that on the homepage where it says Stay Informed. And we just send each month information about our events and our new resources to keep you up to date. We've got an X account as well, which is another good way of just seeing at a glance all the new things coming up. And if you want to get in touch with us, you can email us at education@nutrition.org.uk. Here are the links that I mentioned at the beginning. So when we send out the presentation, you can take a look at those. And then just to say thank you to everybody, we're going to put a link to the evaluation in the chat box, so you can click on that, or you can scan the screen here, or you may already have scanned the screen before. So if you can fill out that evaluation form, that'd be really helpful. And then we'll be able to send you a certificate, and you can print that and keep it. And we'll probably be in touch tomorrow now to send you a link to this presentation, and also to the recording once that's ready. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing now. I've seen there's been a few chats coming up. I don't know if I've missed any questions particularly. I don't know, Bridget, did you notice anything that came up?
Yeah, so there was a query from Claire about the Teach Primary Food and Nutrition, whether that's CPD only for those in a school setting, that she works with primary age children but not in a school, and also whether there'll be more resources available in Welsh.
Right, so sorry, what was the first question? Was about the Teaching Primary Food and Nutrition, wasn't it? Yeah, you're very welcome to sign up for that now. So we're sort of coming to the end of the programme. You are very welcome if you think that's going to be useful to sign up for that. It is self-directed, so it's up to you, sort of, what you do, and you can, choose the parts that are most appropriate. So yes, you're very welcome to sign up for TPFN. I saw so you mentioned about Welsh. Yeah, actually all our 3 to 5 years resources, our whole area is available in Welsh, because we know Welsh is spoken, usually when exclusively when children start nursery and early years education. So it's unfortunately was come down to money, finding funding to get our materials translated, but we're in touch with lots of Healthy Schools colleagues across Wales, and so we're always working to try and find ways to translate more of our resources. So we are very aware of doing that. Somebody's asked me about the early years games. So if you go into the 3 to 5 in the early years area, and you go into healthy eating, and then I think it's Eatwell guide, you should be able to scroll down and see that. I think it's one of the first activities, I think.